What's up everyone, this is Tranquilo Toys with another review. Today I'm taking a look at the Bandai Namco Metal Robots RX-78-2 Gundam from the GQuuuuuX anime. Now the first thing I have to say is, I don't care about the GQuuuuuX anime. I tried to watch it a while ago, I saw the first episode, and I really didn't like what I was seeing. One interesting thing about the anime is that they brought the original Gundam design into that universe. So the reason I got this was purely because of the original show and how this figure is actually based off the original design. So when I saw this figure revealed, you know, it's one of those figures that it doesn't matter how much it costs, you have to get it. So for me, that's what I felt when I saw it. Now, I finally have it here. I have a lot of good things to say about this, a few negative things to say, but I'll let you guys know my honest opinion on the figure. Now, before we get into the review, the first thing we got to talk about is the box. And here's what's going on with the box. So we have a nice picture of the Gundam with the shield and the sword. So it's a pretty cool layout. It'd be nice to display. And on the top, they just have another picture of the figure. Then on the back, they have more pictures of the figure. And then it tells you what parts are made of die cast. So I gotta be honest, I was a little bit disappointed with the amount of die cast that's on the figure. You can see that it's the core of the figure and also the bottoms of the boots, which are die cast. When I heard this was going to have die cast parts, because that's what the Metal Robots line is all about, I was expecting a lot more. I was expecting like the joints, like all the joints being metal, not the entire figure being die cast, but at least the joints, the head sculpt. So that's a tiny bit disappointing in my opinion. You guys let me know what you think about that though. Then we have another picture of some of the other mechs that appear in the GQuuuuuX anime, and even those designs, in my opinion, are very ugly. Basically, the entire look of the show was very ugly. And there's so many Gundam shows at this point. You know, some try to stay true to the original vibe, and some really go off in a different direction. But for me, I'm a fan of the original series. You know, the first Gundam anime, and then also Gundam Zeta, the Char's Counterattack movie. But despite that, I don't really know a whole lot about Gundam. But more than anything, I appreciate and respect the place that the original Gundam anime has, just in terms of anime and animation, the kind of messages that it was portraying, which they definitely steered away from that as the series continued. Anyways, this is just a figure review, so let's talk about the accessories. Now, we're not getting a whole lot of accessories. This is another thing that I was sort of disappointed by. And of course, we expected what the accessories were going to be because we saw pictures of, you know, the figure and the accessories. So we knew that it wasn't going to be a whole lot, especially not as much accessories that came with the figure, which is a smaller version of the same RX-78-2, the Robot Spirits anime version of the figure, which this figure is very good. I was very happy with this figure. Unfortunately, I did lose the original horns or crown, so I just leave, you know, this effect on there because I lost the original part. It should be around here somewhere. But this was a very good figure. There was a lot of accessories that came with it, and I'm going to show you something that I think is pretty cool that I found out in regards to the accessories of this figure. But all we get with the metal build is we obviously get 2 blades for the energy sabers. We get an extra blade with a electrical effect, so like he's blocking an attack. And then we get some hands. So various hands for holding the weapons and for posing and things like that. And then of course we also get the two handles for the sabers, which are removable. The shield. So here's a closer look. The paint is a little bit sloppy on the block on top here. You can see it kind of goes out of line, but you don't really notice that unless you look really close at it. And there's also 2 attachments here that the figure came with. So one to wrap around the wrist, and then one to actually grab the shield with. There's also a stand. It could have been better. I'm also not exactly sure why it's green and sparkly. Probably some reference to the GQuuuuuX anime. And we do have an adapter piece that plugs into the top of the stand. Okay, and I guess I'll talk about the stand now because I really hate this stand. And you guys know me. If there's a stand that I don't like, you know, I'll let you guys know about it. And I do not like this stand. First of all, the design is very odd. It's overcomplicated. Not only do you have this part here, but then you also have this smaller part here, which the larger part here rests on, and you can choose which notch this part of the stand rests on, which is very odd. You know, I feel like if you just had a traditional stand, you wouldn't even need that. But there is some sort of modularity, I guess you can call it. You can raise the stand up and then lock it into place, unlock it, and move it into a different position, lock it back into place. And then for this part down here, you can actually flip this to make that piece longer so that it rests higher. It doesn't look good. It takes up a lot of space. It takes away from the figure, in my opinion. So if you're posing this figure, I suggest not using the stand at all, just because it detracts from the coolness of the figure itself. Now let's talk about the actual figure. So obviously, like I mentioned earlier, the die-cast parts is this chest piece, and it's actually the inner mechanism of the articulation in there, and it's also the outside. So this entire piece right here is die-cast, and also the joints where the legs connect to. As you can see there, it's a reflective metal die-cast for the hip joints, and then also the ball joint in the torso, and also the bottoms of the feet, and that's it. Okay, now getting into the articulation of the figure, I was actually very impressed with the articulation. And as you can see with the poses on the listings for the figure, there are some decent poses that the figure is actually able to. So first of all, in the neck area, there's 3 different points of articulation. So you have a ball joint at the bottom of the neck, then one at the second section of the neck, and then finally a third one at the top of the neck, which allows for a lot of movement, especially with this sort of design. You know, there's not any place for the head to go, so it just kind of runs into itself at the bottom there. But it can look up very far, which is nice for flying poses. Speaking of flying poses, there are no effects to put on the bottom of the feet to show it flying, the bottom of the feet or the back of the, or part of the jetpack here. So that's another unfortunate thing that they didn't include. Also with the head, you can also swivel it, the full 360. Also back here, now the reason you're able to get that much articulation from the head is because this part here actually folds into itself. So you can get the head looking up that far, which is very nice. And then no tilt. Now coming to the shoulders, they're on a butterfly joint or on a hinge joint, so you can hinge it forward like that. And then it doesn't really go back a whole lot, pretty much none. So just hinging out forward is what you're going to get out of that. But they also hinge up, and I believe they're on a ball joint. You can see where it connects in there. And then it also swivels around. We have bicep cut for a swivel, so that swivels full 360. We have double jointed elbows. Look good, and they function well. Now at the wrist, this is sort of an interesting decision that they made. So as you can see, the block that's inserted into the wrist hinges as well as the wrist, but you don't actually choose where that block hinges. And you can't swivel this wrist hinge either, so you can't get a vertical hinge. You pretty much get a double hinge moving on the horizontal axis or the across axis. Would have been nice if this swiveled right here. There's a natural separation there in the sculpt anyway, so I don't know why they didn't have a swivel there. Then you could have swiveled it, and then you could have hinged it vertically and just been able to get more articulation from that. But as it stands, you can only get horizontal movement from that, and I guess you can swivel it at the bicep, and then you can get vertical movement at that. But it's a very limited structure in my opinion. I think it could have been made to be a lot better. It is good enough to get most poses, and especially poses holding the saber. Now coming to the torso, we do have 2 joints here with a ball joint at the bottom and then a hinge at the mid section of the torso, which allows you to get that far. And the torso does pop off from the ball joint here. I did have to put oil because it was very tight, and when I swiveled it, it would make a creaking sound, so that worried me. I didn't want it to break. And I believe this is just plastic here, but the outer part and some of the inner parts are also die cast, but the ball joint itself is plastic. So hinges forward, you know, a decent amount. That's pretty good considering the sculpt and the design of the figure. And then it moves back a little bit. You're not going to get, you know, barely any side to side. This does hinge up here left and right, so you can get some hinge. I guess that might be a ball joint. It's not just a hinge at the midsection. It is 2 ball joints. It might be even 3 ball joints, similar to the neck. It's pretty good for what it is. Swiveling of the torso. It does run into itself, and because this is die cast, you could really mess up the plastic on the bottom here. So it doesn't really go full 360 unless you really force it. Now at the hips here, we do have this skirt piece. Now the way they handled this was sort of interesting. I wish they would have done it the same way that they did it on the side mobile suit series figure, and I'll show you what they did on the metal build. So the leg actually hinges outward Now there's no drop down hip, but it does. But when you kick forward, it hinges outward. This skirt piece is actually on a separate ball joint, and it can shift around a little bit, and you can raise, and it does pop off. You know what I was saying earlier with the hip joints being metal. You can see that part is metal right there, and also the ball joint that the skirt piece connects to is also metal or die cast. But anyways, the leg hinges out that far. That's as far as you can go before the piece is going to pop off. But that's pretty good, but I still prefer the way they did it on the side MS figure, which you can see here. You get much more range, and I think it just looks better and it makes more sense. This part of the skirt does become disjointed, and that might not be accurate, like 100% accurate to the original design, but I mean, look how much articulation it affords you. So I would have preferred it if they would have done that on this figure. Unfortunately, they didn't, and also going out, it seems like you can get a bit more than you can with this figure before the skirt piece pops out. So that is a little bit of a negative. And you can go back a tiny bit. There's also a swivel at the thigh as well. Double jointed knee, looks good, functions well. So there's a ball joint at the top of the ankle, which gets you very good amount of range. And then there's also a hinge at the bottom of the ankle, or at the top of the foot, where the foot connects to the ankle. And that gives you even more range for standing poses. And because of the die cast bottom of the feet, it has enough weight to actually be stable when standing. Kind of like what I was saying earlier, you don't really need to stand the figure up unless you're doing a flying pose. But I think that's everything about the articulation. Swapping the hands is very easy. The hands are soft, not really soft, but they are soft enough to where you don't feel like you're going to break them for posing and things like that. So that's really cool. So there you can see how the shield fits onto the figure. You can grab the handle and then have the wrist guard wrap around the wrist there, so you can hold it, you know, various poses, and it looks really cool. And he has a specific hand for holding the sword that has a little bit of a tighter grip, and then you plug the saber attachment, and there you have the Gundam with the shield and the sword, and it looks awesome. Showing you what that looks like next to the Robot Spirits anime version of the figure. The colors are slightly different, and of course the saber effect with the electrical effect on it, and that looks really cool as well. Now, because there's not really that many accessories included with this figure, and especially compared to the Robot Spirits Side MS version of the figure, here's all the accessories that came with that figure. We had a bazooka, a rocket launcher. We had some different effects for the saber, some blast effects for the rifle as well, right there. And then the hands were kind of a greenish tone, and then also booster effects for the backpack. Then we also had the energy lance and the spike ball and chain, which also appeared in the original anime. And so something that I figured out is that some of these effects actually work very well with this figure. So the swiping effect, or the swooshing effect, whatever you want to call it, fits onto the metal build handle of the saber. So there you can see. And then also the bazooka also fits as well, and you want to switch the hands out to the one that has a looser grip. So there's what it looks like with the bazooka or the rocket launcher. Maybe it should be a little bit bigger, but I don't think that looks too bad, and I think for figure photography it would look very cool. There's also the rifle that the Robot Spirits figure came with. His finger doesn't go through doesn't actually touch the trigger of the gun, of the rifle, but it looks good enough, and I'm actually tempted to cut that finger away from the rest of the fingers so that he can actually properly hold the rifle. But something else I realized you can do is actually put the hands from the Robot Spirits figure onto the metal robot figure, which looks like that, and the hand is smaller than the regular hands that come with the figure, but now he is able to properly hold the rifle with his finger on the trigger. So it looks a bit better, but still, but I guess it looks okay. I don't know, you guys let me know what you think. The energy lance also works very well with this figure, so I'm happy with how that turned out as well. And the ball and chain, which is probably my favorite, the handle with one hand and then the chain in the other, and that looks really sick. There should have been more accessories, or even just more effects. You're paying for the fact that that it has die-cast parts and for the scale of the figure, and they don't make that many non-model kit figures of this design. You know, despite everything, it is a very good figure. I'm happy to have it in my collection. Obviously, if you're a fan of the original series, this is definitely a figure you have to get in your collection. It's very well made, a lot of fun to pose around, and especially if you have the Robot Spirits version of the figure, or really any Robot Spirits, the accessories do work very well in my opinion. We'll do some quick size comparisons here. And speaking of the Robot Spirits figures, here is Char's from the original series. Now, if they did this one, I'd have to get that one as well, just because this design is also very cool. But here is Shinkojo Seiho, SH Figuarts Ultraman. So this Gundam does scale very well with those 6-inch figures. There he is next to Marvel Legends Captain America. Here he is next to He-Man. Of course, 7-inch figure is going to be a lot taller. But here he is next to the sort of 6.5-inch figure of He-Man from the movie. And then, of course, here he is next to Char Aznable from the original anime series. And this is the SH Figuarts figure. So that's really awesome to have those. And then, of course, we have to have an Amuro figure. And here is the very small 4-inch figure. It's probably shorter than 4 inches. But there was the Amuro figure, the only Amuro figure, action figure that actually is out there. It obviously doesn't scale with other 6-inch figures. But that's, that's pretty funny. We need a 6-inch Amuro. I mean, come on. Figuarts needs to make an Amuro figure. It could be from Char's Counterattack, it could be from the original anime series, but we need an Amuro figure. And also, similarly, I'm referring to another anime, another popular mech anime with Evangelion. Here is the Blockies model kit. And speaking of making a figure of Amuro, Blockies needs to make a figure of Shinji. For some reason, with mech animes, Shinji and Amuro are just very neglected in terms of figures being made of them. In the 6-inch scale, they made Asuka, they made Rei, still no Shinji. We need a Shinji, we need an Amuro. If you agree, let me know in the comments. But anyways, that's everything I need to say about this figure. You guys let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.
Amuro, 振り向かないで宇宙の彼方に輝く星はアムロお前の生まれたふるさとだ覚えているかい少年の日のことを暖かいぬくもりの中で目覚めた朝をアムロ